On the same day that Qusair fell, that last Wednesday was the 5th of June, 2013, a day of destiny. You've got the British and the French, who are obviously very devoted to the Sykes-Picot concept, that they get to decide who rules in Syria, right? Who gets to rule the Levant, the Eastern Mediterranean, the old Ottoman Empire territories. The British and the French, that's Cameron and Haig on the British side, Fabius, foreign minister, and Hollande on the French side. They're demanding that the United States attack Syria. This is the big strategic fact. The British and the French are ready to fight to the last American. Isn't that great? They want the United States in there invading, and they're bashing the hell out of Obama to do it. And if you're bashing Obama, guess what? You're a useful idiot for the Bilderbergs, the British, and the French. Congratulations. Are you on the London payroll? Are you on the Paris payroll? Are you on the Bilderberg payroll? Well, you should be. If all you got to do is bash Obama at the time when Obama has this interesting merit, say what you will, he says no to a big invasion of Syria, no to boots on the ground, no to a big air war. He knows how many airplanes will be shot down, how many had the heavy U.S. losses, and ships, maybe an aircraft carrier can be holed in the Eastern Mediterranean with one of those Yakonsk long-range, very powerful, very capable cruise missiles. So Obama, I think out of his own self-preservation, his own egotism, is saying, I don't want any part of this. The British and the French are screaming. They want the invasion. They want the U.S. fighting for them. They, of course, imagine themselves as harvesting the benefits of this. And how do they do this? Enter the left liberal. Enter the limited hangout. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald, the left liberal, sort of civil libertarian, petty bourgeois commentator, writing in The Guardian, the London Guardian, normally speaking, left wing of British intelligence, left wing of MI6. And, of course, Glenn Greenwald, the interesting thing about Glenn Greenwald is he an implacable enemy of government excess? For example, on the great issue of the age, the great covert operation of our time, 9/11, September 11, 2001, what did Glenn Greenwald have to say? He hates 9/11 truth. So he is tainted by the fact that he is, not addressing the main object. And now we've got Ed Snowden, I think a useful idiot, a troubled individual, God knows what, an adventurer, a megalomaniac, or simply troubled. We don't know, maybe for money. It's impossible to know. And you've also got to realize that both of these creatures, Glenn Greenwald and Ed Snowden, are what you see, and behind them, what you don't see is something called GCHQ Cheltenham. That is to say, the British equivalent of the National Security Agency. And remember, everything that Fort Meade, Maryland, the National Security Agency headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, everything they know is known in real time to GCHQ Cheltenham. So much so that if GCHQ Cheltenham wants to wiretap a member of the British Parliament, they don't do it direct. That might be problematic for them. They do it through the NSA, which comes back and wiretaps the British member of Parliament or whoever it happens to be. So we're dealing with a limited hangout. How can you tell it's a limited hangout? Well, one thing is it's old news. There's nothing new. Nothing new. Pentagon Papers, nothing new. If you'd been reading Le Monde in the 60s and 70s, you knew what was in the Pentagon Papers. You knew that and more. If you'd been reading Agence France Presse, you knew what was in the Pentagon Papers. And similarly, Assange, right? The other great example of this, right? Ellsberg, Assange, and now Ed Snowden. Assange, what does he tell us? He hates 9/11 truth also. He has nothing to say about the main scandal of the age. And instead, he tells you a bunch of scandals that hurt who? Well, remember, right? Gaddafi, Berlusconi, Putin, Maliki of Iraq, Karzai of Afghanistan, Kirchner of Argentina, and on and on and on. Everybody on the CIA hit list, everybody on the CIA enemies list gets slammed by WikiLeaks, but no U.S. politician, no Israeli politician, no British politician. I have to be vehement about this because left liberals are really stupid, and right-wingers, reactionaries, libertarians, really, really dumb. They can't see the obvious stuff. And they're all salivating. The right-wingers are salivating. They're going to take down Obama. Wonderful. Let's see what you're going to get. You're going to get an attack on Syria. The British and the French are still screaming. They want that attack. And they have a powerful ally. John Forbes Kerry, Skull and Bones Kerry, and his State Department clique. This week at the White House, Obama will decide what to do about Syria. Now, Obama's desire, and again, call it what you will, Obama basically says, I don't want to do this. This is bad for me. It's bad for Obama. Fine, we'll take it. It is bad for Obama. So don't do it. But rather, what we have then is a lot of really stupid people, a lot of really ideologized, pathetic individuals, a wretched excuse for an opposition, who are piling on to Obama, weakening him and intimidating him to make it easier for the French and the British to get the attack they want. Can you understand this? It's time to mobilize against the war with Syria. We have a very interesting article from the New York Review of Books, a couple of maybe last week or the last issue. David Bromwich, professor at one of the English departments in the universities up there, and he says, advice to Obama, stay out of Syria. That's good advice for any reason, no matter how contorted or inaccurate the argument. Stay out of Syria, but out. If the French and the British are really so devoted to this cause, well, there it is. Go for it. But not the U.S. And I cite also Zbigniew Brzezinski, who argues precisely in these terms, that it's the French and the British who own the critical factions of these rebels, right? The French, well known that they have a lot of these lounge lizards of the Syrian National Coalition, right? The front men for the terrorists. And then the terrorists themselves are loyal to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to the United Arab Emirates, to the other reactionary, unspeakable, absolute monarchies of the Gulf. And a lot of those are sort of in the British orbit, so you get the idea. So this is what's going to be decided this week. Kerry pressing Obama to make the attack. Obama doesn't want to do it. And then, every new scandal, right? Glenn Greenwald says he's got more scandals. Well, I'm sorry. I want to see your bona fides, Glenn. I want to see something about 9/11. I want to see something that overturns the official version on 9/11. The basic rule is the limited hangout artist, first of all, tells you things you already know, generally. There may be one or two things that you may not know that seem new. For example, in the case of Assange, it's that film of the massacre in Iraq, right, from the air with the machine guns. But even that was all known. What was not known or what had not been seen was that specific film. So there's the bait, right? The bait required to awaken the desire to bite and to make yourself into a useful idiot and a dupe. So Ellsberg did it with the Pentagon Papers. Ellsberg with, of course, Morton Halperin and Leslie Gelb in the background, with the help of Genoam Chomsky and Howard Zinn telling you what a great thing this was. That was one fraud. The Pentagon Papers obviously covering up for the CIA, right? Trying to whitewash the CIA on massacres, on Operation Phoenix, on drug running, on many, many other things. And to demonize the U.S. Army, right? To put it off on them, right? All the draftees, yeah. Get them. Get Lieutenant Calley. Don't go after Alan Dulles, but get Lieutenant Calley. And The other thing, of course, in the Pentagon Papers, there's nothing about the main covert action of the age, the Kennedy assassination. And then we come to Assange and Ed Snowden. Both of them are very self-righteous. Both of them are holier than thou, right? They're takfiris here in the West. And they say, we have nothing about 9/11. And in the case of Assange, he actually hates it. Now, in the case of Ed Snowden, he's a Paul-tard, folks. He's a follower of the leprechaun. So it means he voted for genocidal austerity against the American people. He voted to cut 63% out of food stamps for 50 million Americans. So he would have blood on his hands. He would have Americans dying of malnutrition and starvation. So what's the kind of humanitarian he is? He's a libertarian, a jackal, an austerity ghoul. And we have that because he gives money to Ron Paul and also voted for him according to most accounts. That seems to be what he says. So this is now the situation. I have to say also the leftists not looking too good at this confab there in New York, right, that we just had, the Left Forum. There was an evening there with Oliver Stone and Kuznick, or Klutznick as I call him. They were there, and we'll talk about this later, get into the content of it. But one of the things they showed was Glenn Greenwald, and sure enough, there goes a round of applause for Glenn Greenwald. As Mort Saul, I think it was, once said, American leftists have had so few heroes that they give their heart away to any plausible faker who comes down the pike, from Ellsberg to Assange to Sanders or Snowden, whatever his name is. And, well, there you have it. Now, naturally, I don't wish any of these people bad, any evil consequences. I think Manning should be freed, get Manning out of jail. Let Snowden take refuge in Russia, since Putin is offering that to him. But mobilize to stop the war with Syria. That's the main front. No war with Syria. Call the Obama White House. Try to put some backbone into that guy. We'll be back in a minute on Webster Tarpley program. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Therefore, the current situation is this. As of last week, the death squads, the rebels, are losing big time in Syria. They've got about a month or two left, I would think, before they're driven back to a thin strip along the Turkish border. They're going to be driven out of Homs. They're going to be driven out of Aleppo. And each one of these is a battle of encirclement. It's a battle of annihilation in which large numbers of death squad jihadis are simply being wiped out. And this is unfortunately the fate that they have chosen. But on the same day, last Wednesday, June 5th, that Qusair fell and the fortunes of war began to evolve, right? This is Stalingrad and the Falaise pocket, the Falaise breakout together. We've got the counterattack of the British and the French demanding that Obama attack Syria, prevent the death squads from being exterminated. They're basically saying those death squads, that's our Middle East army. That's what they used in Libya. That's what they're using in Syria. They'd like to go on. They'd like to turn those guys against Iraq or Iran or whatever it is, Lebanon further down the road. But they're going to be exterminated within a certain number of months. So that's why they're screaming. That's the really urgent side of it. And, enter Glenn Greenwald, enemy of 9/11 truth, and covering for U.S. covert operations. His sidekick, Ed Snowden. You got the London Guardian, British Intel in the back, GCHQ Cheltenham, giving them anything they need to know, letting them know what leads to follow. And of course, our dear libertarians, Pavlovian salivation on cue, and our left liberals, Pavlovian salivation on cue. What a disgusting panorama of suicidal stupidity. Let's take a look at the Bilderberg group. This is the irony again. We had this here last year at Chantilly, Virginia. But now we've had it in Watford. And it goes like this. You've got the Bilderberg with financiers like Peter Thiel, right, the financial angel for Ron Paul, and I'm sure for Rand Paul too eventually, on the inside. And then you get the so-called opposition on the outside. Now, my challenge to people who have been talking a lot about this, a lot of noise coming out. What is the issue? is it simply the existence of Bilderberg? Is that the issue? Or is it what they do, their policies, right? Where they want to take the world. And as far as I could see, for a lot of these people, it's just the fact that they exist and to get that into the newspaper. That's not enough. I want to know what their policies are, and then I want to stop them. I want to fight them to a standstill on those policies. And, of course, this Obama thing, this leads the pack, right? Just when the British and the French want every useful idiot in the world to attack Obama for whatever reason, and they're trying to stoke this up with Glenn Greenwald and Snowden here, and the NSA scandals, right? The Verizon and Prism scandals. You know all about these. The Bilderberg protesters launch petition to impeach Obama. Just what we need. How about a petition to stop the war in Syria? How about a petition to Obama? You could do this. It's a good idea. You send it to Obama. You say, don't attack Syria, because if you do, we will throw you out of office. We will get you impeached. But if you stay away from these wars, this war in particular, then that will look different. Remember, let's get the scoreboard, right? There are a lot of drones, there's a lot of killing, a lot of invasions, a lot of other stuff. But Obama has ended the war in Iraq. Obama is ending the war in Afghanistan. Obama says he wants to repeal the authorization to use military force of September 2001. You know, the one little Ron Paul voted for. He was for the Afghanistan war before he was against it. And now Obama says no to the attack on Syria. Now, of course, Obama does a lot of terrible things, renditions, Guantanamo, drones, assassinations, special forces, killing scientists, all kinds of things. But there it is. There is no war with Syria yet. Don't you want to hold on to that fact? I'm going to hold on to it with both hands and with my teeth. And we've got to try to stop the attack on Syria. Obama can wait. Obama can wait. Ed Snowden can wait, right? The NSA can wait. The issue right now is no war with Syria. Mobilize on that or be damned. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program. It's Tuesday, the 11th of June here in Washington, D.C. I'm wrapping up this Bilderberg. So again, we've got the Bilderberg going on inside with Thiel, the anarcho-capitalist, the predator young wolf, supporter of Ron Paul and Rand Paul. And the inside, and then on the outside, we've got the so-called protest. And the truly amazing thing is that what the Bilderberg most aggressive faction around Thiel wants seems to be pretty much what the opposition wants. And I say this to point to the fact it is not enough to denounce the existence, to expose the existence of the Bilderberg group. That's just elementary. But then you've got to find out what are their policies, and then you got to fight those policies and replace them with something better. The embarrassing thing for so many of the opposition is that as soon as they get into discussing what the Bilderberg policies are, many of them are the same. The most obvious policies are the same. Bilderberg wants Obama out, Petraeus in, the dictatorship of Petraeus. You're concerned about tyranny? Petraeus is the name of tyranny in our age, the focus of Bonapartist tendencies here in the United States. And the, I guess we can say, as in the ancient world, right? The cult of Apollo, maybe Delphi, the cult of Apollo at Delphi controls the cult of Dionysios. That's a good rule of thumb. Look to the cult of Apollo, the rich, the patricians, the families with money and position. The cult of Apollo controls the cult of Dionysios, right? The cult of Dionysios is the sort of scurrilous stuff that goes on in the streets. So on the inside, they're discussing Petraeus. They're discussing what I take to be the coup d'etat coming of General Petraeus. He's backed up by an entity, Kravis, and Gefeller. Henry Kravis, $4 to $5 billion. Marie-José Kravis, the Hudson Institute, First Order, a think tank of the first magnitude, and Gefeller, ExxonMobil, State Department, and the rest of it. And, of course, I'm sure much more. Why not denounce Petraeus? And I don't mean denounce him for big data. I mean denounce him as somebody who's a Bonapartist and who tried last year to steal the election for Romney. We had a brush with a military coup with all those generals and admirals and the entire Benghazi incident being designed to put Bishop Romney and his permanent austerity and war dictatorship into the White House. And thanks to the efforts of some of us who still have a brain, and thanks to the American people who could see what a sneering, disgusting plutocrat that Romney was, and how he hated the American people and wanted to flay them alive and strip them and loot them. There was a backlash against that, right? Especially in the black community and the Hispanics, right? Those communities that don't seem to get much attention from these anti-Bilderberg opposition types, at least the ones coming from the U.S., let's put it that way. And then we have austerity. On the inside, the Bilderberg people are saying, let's get killer cuts. We want genocidal austerity. We want to cut wages. We want to cut government services. We want to cut Medicare. We want to gouge food stamps and all these other essential programs that many people rely on to live. And outside, yeah, it's the same story. Down with big government, cut everything to the bone. Ron Paul's program to cut food stamps by 62 to 63%. On the inside, they hate the euro. They hate the euro because they've got to destroy the euro in order to save the dollar and the pound. And on the outside, we're being told that the euro is a Nazi plot. Well, the euro is what it is, and once you've got it, you could say this was not ideal, but it has roots that are far deeper, and it has reasons that are far more complex, and in many cases valid reasons, than would be obvious to somebody who has one document and wants to see the world through the keyhole of one document. That's called keyhole history. You can't do it. Monocausal explanations are almost always absolutely wrong. Oh, and then on the inside, they're discussing mini-states, micro-states, warlords, how to break up existing countries, right? They've done it in Serbia. They've done it in Sudan. They want to do that in Syria, Lebanon. They've done it in Iraq effectively. They want to go on to Iran and Pakistan and Turkey. And on the outside, we got the glorification of secessionism with the Kokesh fan club. So you get it? On Obama, on austerity, on the euro, on mini-states, micro-states, and other principal issues. There's really not a dime's worth of difference between the outside opposition and the Bilderberg plutocrats on the inside. And it just reminds you, the cult of Apollo controls the cult of Dionysios. The libertarians were created by David Rockefeller, who funded von Hayek and von Mises. And the Mount Pelerin Society, meeting at Vevey, Switzerland in, 47, 48, they are also key to putting Milton Friedman and his idiot version up there. All right, so we'll turn away from Bilderberg for the moment, but that Petraeus, that's what remains with us, the Petraeus issue. Oh, and maybe one other thing. You look at Beppe Grillo, for example, right? Darling of NATO, darling of the U.S. State Department, darling of the Goldman Sachs, and so forth. What's his method? Vulgarity, screaming, rage ball. This is not the method, right? Grillo says he got it from the movie Network. Remember that? Faye Dunaway, William Holden, and this other guy who was the TV demagogue. And I'm fed up, and I'm not going to take this anymore. So the explosion of sort of primal scream rage. This is not the right method. This is the wrong method. There has to be an appeal to reason, and when you see it in Grillo, you see the demagogue, you see the veneer of civilization wearing thin, and underneath that, the primal scream and other forms of irrationalism, quite frankly. You got to have a reasoned discourse. There has to be an appeal to reason and an appeal to enlightened self-interest, as well as an appeal to emotions in the form of righteous anger about what Wall Street and the City of London have done. All right, but now let's switch over to another very interesting topic, and that is the Saturday evening at the Left Forum in New York City. We had a presentation by the distinguished filmmaker, and at times he has done things of tremendous value, Oliver Stone, and a lesser figure, a historian, I think from American University, Philip Kusnik. And Kusnik, I'm afraid, has essentially dragged Oliver Stone away from his own much better instincts and exercised a baleful influence on this new 10-part sequence on Starz Network. Apparently they're up to 12 sequences now, and then they've got an 800-page book, and we'll look into that too. One of the obvious problem with this was this is a left forum, right? And they tell you during the course of the debate, they show you some film clips and so forth, and they say, all right, we want to make sure we get this all done because we want to leave plenty of time for discussion at the end. Plenty of time for discussion here at the Left Forum. So there's a microphone, and there's a guy, I'm up there. I think I'm number 3, and then I become number 2. And then they say, because they don't want to stand up anymore. So we get to the end of the program, and they say, okay, now it's question time. And then they look and they see there's a line of people at the microphone. And they said, oh, no, we didn't mean real questions from live people who can answer back and develop, the famous Platonic dialectic dialogue. No. We have questions on cards, which we're going to carefully screen and otherwise, essentially deprive of any edge, right? Now, these were all softball questions. It was the method of the National Press Club. So Left Forum, New York Left Forum, takes over bankrupt method of National Press Club. So they wanted to screen this duo of Oliver Stone and Kusnik from, criticism. Now, they have been criticized. Then let me make this clear. The Princeton historian Sean Willents has criticized them in a way which I think is absolutely invalid. He's criticizing them from the right. He's criticizing them saying, you should hew close to the establishment line. You guys are anti-establishment, and that's no good. I'm attacking now, I'm criticizing from the left, and I say, you are not anti-establishment enough. You are hiding, or you are avoiding and dodging the big questions that would actually lead to a different concept of the history of the last 60, 70, 80 years. Now, let's just look at a couple of things here. In his distinguished JFK movie, right, Oliver Stone was nothing less than heroic in tearing apart the Kennedy assassination cover-up. And that has, thank God, become a permanent datum of the outlook of the American people. But now when you look at this series, what we find, first of all, is there is no systematic development of the case that Kennedy was assassinated by the CIA operations directorate, which is implicit, certainly very strongly, in the movie, right, based with the Fletcher Prouty material and so forth. So, in effect, all we learn in this movie, The Untold History of the United States, I guess it's called, Stone and Kusnik, all we know is that Kennedy had powerful enemies. Well, lots of people have powerful enemies. That's not enough. Then this is compounded. Going backwards, in the case of Franklin D. Roosevelt, we have an assassination attempt in 1933, a coup attempt in 34-35, another coup attempt in 37, another coup attempt in 42, and finally, it looks to me like an assassination by poisoning, most likely between 43, 44, and finally the death in 45. And, well, one of the merits of the Stone and Kusnik book is that they discuss the work by Elliot Roosevelt called As He Saw It. Elliot Roosevelt, son of FDR, had been with him at the Casablanca and Tehran conferences and writes what he saw. And this was conflict very, very sharp clashes between Roosevelt and Churchill. Churchill saying the British Empire will last forever, and Roosevelt saying, no, we're going to take down your empire at the end of this war. We're saving you, but we're not saving your empire. We're saving you from Hitler, but we're not here to preserve the British Empire with American blood. Isn't that amazing? They're always ready to fight to the last American, as they are today, right? Cameron and Hollande. So, Elliot Roosevelt is a good source, and they have him. Why not follow this a little bit further? We have the famous Parade magazine interview of Elliot Roosevelt, where he goes to the Kremlin in 1946, and Stalin says to him, your father, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, was assassinated by the Churchill gang, by Sir Winston Churchill and his gang using poison. Stalin then says, they're also trying to kill me, Stalin. And they eventually succeeded, as far as we can tell. And we know also from Harriman, another name that came up in this debate, Harriman, Averell Harriman, U.S. ambassador to Moscow, when he went to the Kremlin to tell Stalin that Roosevelt was dead, Stalin said, I believe he was poisoned. I want my ambassador Gromyko to see that body. And eventually the answer is no. And there's an attempt to blame Eleanor Roosevelt for this. I don't know whether that's going to be valid. I think some other people might have wanted to hide the fact that Roosevelt was murdered from somebody like Stalin. Anyway, when Stalin says something, this is not some lunatic conspiracy theorist paranoid that you meet in the street. This is the Soviet Union. This is the KGB, the GRU, the Mindel, the Soviet Foreign Ministry. This is a whole huge apparatus speaking through Stalin. So that has to be taken seriously. Not a word. So there's not a word about the assassination attempts and the final assassination of Franklin D. Roosevelt. There's not a real word about the real Kennedy assassination. And, of course, there's not a word about 9/11. There's not a word about the great covert operation of our own time. So not good enough. Not good enough. A few more things on this in our final segment. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program. Our last segment here. It's Tuesday, June 11th, 2013. Talking about the debate there. It really was no debate, unfortunately. It was a monologue with more voices from Oliver Stone, Kuznick, one or two others at this left forum in New York. Here's what it comes down to. If you ignore the assassination and coup attempts against Roosevelt, you ignore the Kennedy, the real background of the Kennedy assassination, because that's a retreat for Oliver Stone. That's lamentable. And if you simply ignore 9/11, right, you accept the crackpot, lunatic official version on that, what you're really doing is you're really saying that your creature comforts are more important than historical truth, because these are, after all, these are the ugly, messy issues where moral and intellectual courage are required. You can't dodge those. They're too big, and they're decisive. Each one of those sets the situation for an entire era. A 20 or 30 year time frame is essentially preset by the Roosevelt assassination, the Kennedy assassination, and now by 9/11. And we see how hard it is to break out of the lunatic logic of these things. If you say, in effect, well, I'm a left liberal academic here, and I'm not going to touch any of that, right? I might lose my funding. That's too messy. I might get called a conspiracy theorist. This is what it comes down to. They want to dodge, or Kuznick wants to dodge, the issues where he might be called a conspiracy theorist. For Stone, it's too late. Stone has courageously gone into the fray with the Kennedy movie 20 years ago. He's been slandered as a conspiracy theorist up and down. So that's not his problem. I think it's Kuznick's problem. Don't be a conspiracy theorist or you'll lose your tenure or whatever it is. Now, the problem with that is if you have this unmitigated pessimism, which they have, what are you drifting for? Let me just talk about the pessimism for 1 second. For example, there are good things the U.S. did. For example, Eisenhower at Suez, very timely. Eisenhower at Suez in 1956 says, France, Britain, Israel, get out of Egypt. Stop attacking. Go home. Make peace. And he cuts them off at the knees financially, logistically. They want to demonize Johnson. I can see this. I mean, God knows what I thought of Johnson at the time. But then, look at what the black community or Hispanics think of Johnson, right? This is, after all, the war on poverty, and it worked. It brought down poverty by 10% or so. It was very effective as long as it lasted. And we're talking also here about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Kennedy had all the aspirations, true. Johnson made this reality. And then, need I say, Medicare, could we say that perhaps, Johnson partially redeemed himself by bringing in the Medicare program? I think there's an argument to be made there.